Ready to explore the cutting edge of digital infrastructure? I'm Carrie Charles, your host of Let's Get Digital. Join me as we dive into the ideas, technologies, and leaders transforming the way we connect. From wireless telecom to fiber networks, data centers, and beyond. Sponsored by Broadstaff in partnership with RCR Wireless News. Now, let's dive in and let's get digital.
Thanks for joining me today on Let's Get Digital. I'm so glad you're here. We have a really, really cool episode. I have with me today who I consider a friend in the industry. I have known this man, I believe, for 11 years since I've been in the industry. And I want to introduce to you today Bernard Borghei. He is the founder and CEO of Connected Infra Group. He is also one of the most respected leaders in the wireless industry, and he has helped build companies like Global Tower Partners and Vertical Bridge. We are going to hear so much more today. We're going to hear about the tower industry, about wireless, and all about the amazing company that he's building and what he's up to right now. So Bernard, thank you for joining me. I'm so excited about this episode.
Good morning. Thanks for inviting me. Glad to be connected with you again. Looking forward to this conversation.
So I want to start with you and your story. You have been in the wireless infrastructure, building the wireless infrastructure industry. Has it been 3 decades?
Yeah, 33 years going into it this year.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I want to know, let's go way back. How did you even start? And how did you stay passionate all these years? Because I know you are still on fire.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, I grew up in this industry. I was a young guy and a young kid when I took my first job here. So it's one of those things that fate has in store for you, Carrie, because it was the end of the spring semester of my senior year at Villanova Engineering School. And I had one more semester to graduate. I was going to graduate at the fall semester. And so I was working on my senior project in the hallways. Everybody was gone home. And Comcast made a phone call to the chairman of the electrical engineering department. They said, hey, we need an intern for our wireless team in King of Prussia outside of Philadelphia, which is not too far from where Villanova is. I was actually doing my senior projects on solid states and electric vehicles because I thought that was the future. I had never even paid attention to digital communication. So the dean came out, saw me in the lab, and he's like, what are you doing here? I said, I'm working on my senior project. He said, you want to go make some money this summer, work on cellular phones? And I'm like, what the heck are those? And he's like, no, it's really interesting. So he's like, write a resume and go to this office tomorrow for an interview. And literally that was it. I showed up at the Comcast offices in King of Prussia, had no idea what cellular was. Comcast was the A side of the analog operator in Philadelphia. And I think the B side was Bell Atlantic, which is now, Verizon. So I show up and they look at my resume and they're like, what do you know about an industry? I'm like, nothing. I've taken digital processing and digital communications and all the physics and stuff, but I've been working on electric vehicles. They're like, not a problem. We just need an intern for the summer. That was it. I started working and I really got into it. And when fall came around and I was going back to take my last 3 classes, the Dave Zilka, who's another executive in this industry who's been around for a long time. He now, I think, is the COO of Carolina West. He came up to me. He was our director in Comcast. He said, the team likes you. If you want to come part-time while you're taking your classes, I'm happy to keep you on. And if you finish the semester and you get your engineering degree, I'll hire you as an RF engineer to work on this system. I was like, perfect, I have a job. So I did it and never looked back. So I've been in this industry since the analog days. I worked on deploying amps to NAmps, which is when we went from like 10 kilohertz of bandwidth to 30 kilohertz on an analog system. And we thought we had arrived back then, right? And look at us now. So that's how I got into it. Worked for Comcast, worked for Bell Atlantic Mobile Services when PCS licenses were issued. I went to Sacramento. I wanted to learn GSM because back then GSM was the hottest thing in the US. We had this holy war between George Schmidt, who was pushing GSM, and Qualcomm that was pushing CDMA. And I was like, I'm going to go with GSM because the Europeans were deploying it too. From there, George Schmidt actually came and took over OmniPoint, recruited me back from Sacramento to Philadelphia. And that's when I got into management. He gave me my first management job. He and Steve Boyle made me RF engineering manager for Philly. And Philly back then was the fifth largest MTA in the country. So there I learned about management and, started learning about budgets and network expansions and all that stuff. We launched OmniPoint and met a lot of great people throughout that process. And that was around the same time that Alex Gilman and Jeff Ginsberg and Mark Ganzi started their first company called Apex, which was a rooftop management company. And I was one of their early clients because I needed to deploy sites around Philadelphia. Zoning was horrible. Not that it's that much better these days, but back then it was even worse. And so I wanted to get on rooftops, and there's a Marriott at the Philly airport that was the only place we could put antennas on to cover the airport. So Alex and I worked together to get that rooftop under their management, so then I could sign a lease and deploy. And our friendship started from that point on. And we went through a lot of journey together, helped each other. He helped me get introduced to the Triton PCS team. I worked for Triton PCS. And then I went to Europe. I worked for Western Wireless International in Dublin, Ireland, building a GSM network there. Moved to London. I ran Europe, Middle East, and Africa for a company that was called WFI. It was one of the early services companies in our industry that went public. And around the same time, Alex exited, Apex and came to London at the same time. We did some work together. And so our friendship and partnership grew. And long story short, a couple of stops here and there with True Position and some satellite work. I was in an office working in Washington, D.C., and Alex called me. He said, hey, Mark has this tower company called Global Tower Partners. He just got Blackstone to sell it to Macquarie, and he has thoughts and ideas about doubling the size of the company. He needs people who can help him run it. I'm like, sounds good. And he's like, okay, well, I'll see you in Florida in like 2 weeks. I'm like, what?
Sounds like him.
Yeah. So I showed up, I met with everybody, learned what they wanted to do. And I was like, you know what? Why not? Of course, I got a lot of looks from my wife, moving from Philly, Dublin, London, back to Washington. And now we were going to Florida. And she kept saying, funny enough, she's like, you keep moving south. So I guess Puerto Rico and something else is next. But we came here in 2009 in South Florida. And fortunately, we've been here. But that was the start of the infrastructure side. We had a great run as partners in Global Tower Partners, sold that to American Tower in 2013. And then a few of us came back, Mike Belsky, Mark Ganzi, Alex Gilman, and I. Mark went to establish Digital Bridge, and the other three of us started Vertical Bridge and brought on a lot of great partners to help us build the team, raised $1 billion of equity and all that. And, the rest became history. Once again, it's now about 12, 13 years into it. Vertical Bridge is doing great. Largest privately held telecom company. I was there for the first eight and a half years. And in our last transaction or sort of exit where CDPQ and Digital Bridge sort of took out the existing investors, I also exited and started to sort of look around to spread my own wings. And, a couple of stops here and there, I realized that I needed to create a culture where I could be comfortable with rather than just, trying to work for somebody else. And that's really why in January, I launched the Connected Infra Group, met with, Ryan Lupine and his team at Peppertree. We're culturally, investment-wise, on the same page, a very supportive team, and we managed to get to a good place. They committed $1 billion to the business model and the idea, and I'm super excited. So yeah, I've been doing this for 33 years, but there's never a dull moment in this industry. So for me, it's not hard to get up every morning and be motivated. I love building teams. I really love building companies and watch them grow. I'm fortunate enough that after all these years, I have enough friends in the industry that I can choose who I want to work with. So I'm really excited about the partners that are joining our team. And I still very strongly believe in our industry. I think we are absolutely, the critical part of our economy, the future economy, the digital economy. And, I can't wait to see what the next 10 years or so will be, and looking forward to be a part of it.
Let's go. Let's get inspired in this episode, Bernard. I'm ready.
Sure.
I want to hear about Connected Infra Group, and I want to hear about your vision. Just tell me all about it.
Sure. So we're starting, once again, focusing on the tower space to begin with. The idea is that we're going to, acquire portfolios that are available and look to have the opportunity to become build-to-suit partner where it makes sense for us, for the carriers. And, there's plenty of subcategories within those sort of segments of acquisition and build. There are small cells, there are mid cells that are becoming more popular. And there's always, the macro sites as well. And for me, that's one critical pillar to stabilize the company, the platform, and be able to and put all of our collective 30 some years of experience and evaluate some of the adjacencies that are developing. A lot of people have gone into fiber in building data centers, and now we're here constant talk about power generation and power delivery systems and things like that. I'm, very carefully studying what some of these adjacencies could mean to a new platform like us. I do believe that as we mature our tower business, we'll have the flexibility to expand into some of these other things. A few of these adjacencies are going through some transitions, like in building segment for me is one that has had some ups and downs. The property owner pay model, whether that's going to really be sustainable, how much you can grow it. And some companies have done well, some companies are trying to figure it out. And then this whole power generation on the data center side, which I firmly believe that the need is there and the opportunities are there, but we're talking about deploying a lot of capital upfront for a very long payback period. The underwriting and the investment thesis for something like that is way different than building a tower portfolio. So I'm looking at some of those things. I believe I have at least another 18 to 24 months of doing what I need to do to stabilize and put Connected Infra on a sort of growth trajectory with the tower business, which allows my partners and I to educate ourselves about where some of these other opportunities are heading and which ones would make sense for us to start looking into.
So let's look back a bit at, where the tower industry was and where it is today. And just tell us a little bit about that evolution so we can really understand the transformation and where we sit right now.
From a business standpoint, obviously, it's a more mature business. When we were working in GTP or even in Vertical Bridge, I share a story. I don't think it's anything confidential anymore, but it goes to show the entrepreneurship spirit that we all had in Vertical Bridge. Most people don't know that the executives in Vertical Bridge, the early team that was there, let's call it month, 4 or 5, maybe month 6 or 7, we agreed to buy iHeartMedia's assets before we even had our equity raised and our board settled.
Love it.
And we negotiated that in Aspen at a restaurant when Mark was hosting a group of investors. And he and Alex were telling Dan Marienberg, Bob Page, and I what they're thinking. And we're like, this is how the model looks, and this is what they're saying. And they were entertaining the investors. Bob, Dan, and I were going into the hallway in front of the bathroom in the restaurant and having $900 million negotiations with I. And we did it, and we never looked back. We got a little bit, dirty looks next morning when the investors came in town and they said, you did what? Good, we're going to lease it up, trust us. And it worked. But, it's one of the things that, Mark always said, look, you got to invest with conviction. So we had conviction that we could make it work. So those type of opportunities aren't there necessarily. You're not going to get 900 tower opportunities every day. But there's still plenty of portfolios to transact. They're good quality portfolios. And so it makes the environment more competitive, and it's driven the private multiples high. And I think when you compare it to what's been happening to the stock prices of the publicly traded companies in our segment, it's really not jiving. They're obviously have been penalized for everything that's happened in the macro economy, but the private multiples have sustained themselves at historically high levels. So from a business standpoint, the tower business today is more competitive. Private deals are more expensive. But I believe that what we've also seen is the reliance of public on everyday usage of wireless networks continues to drive the need for densification, the need for expansion, and also, every day further cements the criticality of this infrastructure in our everyday lives, whether it's our private businesses to our homeland security to everything that we do. These broadband networks are really critical infrastructure. So that's the part that I remain very excited and confident about, that carrier clients are really in a good business segment. Their services that they're offering are improving every day and are needed, critically by everybody. And so those of us in the infrastructure side that support and enable them to connect their subscribers, we play a critical role to help them as well. So I think we've seen the entire infrastructure business with the convergence of data centers and fiber and towers become even more and more critical to our economy and everyday life. But we've also seen that acquisitions and opportunities have become a lot more competitive.
So let's look in the future even further, because the demand for data has just exploded. It's going to continue to explode. It's like the gold rush right now. There's so much excitement around it. But let's go even further in the future. What does the next phase of wireless infrastructure look like as networks struggle to keep up with that demand?
Yeah, I don't think there's one thing for sure. We have not yet seen a report or a forecast that says we're even close to plateauing at our growth when it comes to usage of data and the stress that these networks continue to feel every day from the usage that all of us put on them. So that part is there. The growth is there. What is going to really be the next phase of evolution? We've got 6G standards coming in. We've got AI impact, obviously. We haven't even felt the true impact of AI on the RAN side of the wireless networks, right? Everything is being done on the core side, in the data centers and things like that. But, this is where, we both were at the Metro Connect, and there was a lot of conversation, excitement about investment in data centers, which I don't deny it. But I think I mentioned to you, I said at the end of the day, all those AI apps still have to go through the RAN to get downloaded on your mobile and be able for you to use it as you move around with your handset. So the tower segment, specifically in my view, is yet to enjoy the benefits of the deployments of AI and sort of the rush, as you said, the gold rush of getting AI deployed. So as far as what's really coming in the future, I think you're going to see really the convergence sort of take full shape where, the lines of distinguishing infrastructure assets could even become, more blurred. Now we're beginning to see finally that edge computing is getting some legs under it. I deployed one of the first edge data centers probably 6 years ago for Vertical Bridge in a partnership with a gentleman named Doug Recker, who was at that time getting financed by my sister company, DataBank. And Doug and I went to a rural sites in Georgia and deployed an edge data center for a Walmart store that did not want to have its point of sale traffic travel from 2 hours outside of Atlanta to a data center in Atlanta. And they'd heard about this and they asked us if we could prove the concept. And we had a site there at that shopping center where Walmart was with plenty of compound space. So we actually deployed it. And back then, the Cowan team came and videoed us, interviewed us, and showed the inside of the data center. And it wasn't really just a shelter that we had outfitted to be a data center, and that was it. And then after that, the business really didn't come around because 5G wasn't ready, the applications weren't ready, AI was nowhere to at the scale that it is today. But now that concept is what everybody's beginning to sort of bring to fruition. You hear everybody talking about edge deployment, close to the end user. We knew the theory, we knew the standard, we knew the concept, and we knew it was going to come to fruition. It needed time. It needed 6 years for the industry to mature and for the need to be there to make the investment work. So you're going to see that, this lines of towered edge data centers, data center, hyperscale, regional, all those things get even closer and closer. And I wouldn't be surprised to say that sizable tower companies today will end up owning data centers and those type of infrastructures as part of their portfolio. The same way that I would say I wouldn't be surprised if a hyperscale data center operator ends up acquiring a tower portfolio that, just to become a true infrastructure platform. And we also have the satellite business that has made a lot of progress to improve their sort of limitations. 8 years, 9 years ago, we were all saying latency is not good, the bandwidth is not good, quality is not good, but they've made a lot of improvements. And you see the carriers are beginning to have more confidence offering the satellite services in extreme rural areas. They're still not as competitive as they need to be in suburban and dense environments. Wouldn't be surprised to see a satellite sort of provider to have a terrestrial network to sort of complete that equation for them. So there's a lot of possibilities, and we'll see what the 6G standard will dictate, or let's say enable, rather than dictate, enable for the industry. And let's see how far the AI movement will push further stress on all of these networks, and we'll react and we'll adopt and we'll accommodate.
So would you say that towers are being overlooked by investors right now? And if so, what are they getting wrong? I know that you are bullish around, we're still in the growth phase. I mean, what are your thoughts there from an investment standpoint?
So, it's not for me to say any investor is getting anything wrong. They're all very smart, experienced people. But what I would say is that, it's natural to see that, the towers are a bit more mature of an industry. And so as a segment matures up, the barrier to entry gets harder and more difficult. So, and then you have all these data center conversations with the explosion of AI and now the power generation. If you're an investor, you have funds of $6, $7, $8, $9 billion, and you're looking at deploying a couple of $1 billion just to build a power station, that's, and you've got the long-term horizon of, investing for 12, 15, 17 years for your payback. That's now attractive because you get to deploy a lot of your capital and your returns are almost guaranteed, because what I'm hearing is the clients for the data center operators are willing to sign long-term non-cancelable leases in order to have access to the power generation or power delivery sort of stations as well. So I think that is what is driving. It's easier and more opportunity for people to penetrate and invest in the data center business. But by no means do I look at that as if the towers are not important, critical, attractive, and still growth oriented. Are there some people who may be chasing the new shiny object? Perhaps. But I think experienced investors sort of realize the timing and where they can come in to invest their capital. And you have really well-established institutional investors like Peppertree, like DigitalBridge, who still have a lot of their capital invested in a lot of different tower infrastructures. I have sister companies with Peppertree, with Everest and TowerCo. Vertical Bridge is owned still by DigitalBridge and CDPQ. You're not hearing Mark Ganzi talking about exiting Vertical Bridge, even though he's made the deal with SoftBank because of the growth in AI. So I think established, experienced investors still fully recognize the value of the tower sector.
And Connected Infra Group is a perfect example of that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk, you've scaled and managed so many companies and you've led thousands of people. What are some of the leadership lessons that you've learned about, growing and scaling companies? Let's focus on leadership. Then we're going to go into culture next, because I want to have a whole other question for you on culture.
Yeah, look, it's actually interesting that you posed the question that way, because I have a difficulty separating culture from leadership. I don't think one can exist in lieu of
I love it. Okay.
Honestly. And, it's just how I was brought up in this industry. One of the things, and I'm involved with Villanova's engineering school. I believe in giving back. And I do give some lectures. And I know sometimes when I'm talking about these things, the kids are focused on passing the grade and moving on. They want to graduate. And yet here I am trying to give them 30 some years of lessons learned. But even if a little bit of it sinks in, I think at least I've done my job. The thing about culture and leadership is you learn not just by watching successful people do what they do right, but you also learn from their mistakes, okay, and how they recover from their mistakes. And it's also okay to look at someone you admire and say, I don't necessarily like the way he or she handled that scenario. And if I'm ever in that scenario, in that circumstance, I'm going to handle it differently. I think that's the advantage of working for good leaders in your career, because you learn from the good and what you also, don't subscribe to. So I've had the pleasure of working for some of the very well established people in this industry. Again, my early days with George Schmidt, who's a legend, and how he really managed to get OmniPoint rolling and be one of the first people to deploy GSM in the US, and how he sort of stood up for bringing GSM into the US and sort of forcing the conversation between the CDMA camp and the GSM camp, and making sure that the US industry wasn't going to fall behind. And there was a lot of private conversations that at that point he let young managers like I sit in those meetings and hear what he and Gary Cuccio were talking about strategizing. And then, I worked, for people at Triton PCS, Mike Calogres, Steve Skinner. They were great people in fundraising, strategizing, and they always opened the door for me to sit and listen. And when I had a question, they answered it. When I had a thought, they listened. And then obviously getting to know Alex Gilman and Mark Ganzi, great friends, taught me a lot. I was a young guy too. I would get frustrated. I would have my moments, ups and downs. And one of the things I learned, from Alex was how to always step back and bring things down, slow it down, and don't overreact. Just take your time to make the decision. So, and then how individually handling yourself that way, but also leading your teams and your companies, that leads to the culture. I think people who come to work with you want to see somebody who's confident in his or her vision and is willing to put the time into it. I always have said to my teams, I will never ask you to work harder than I'm willing to work myself. Okay, I don't subscribe to the executive cliche of I'm at the 30,000 feet and just give me the high level. I don't. I get into the details every day. I roll up my sleeve with the rest of my team. I want to know what they know, and I want to know how they do what they're doing, because if I don't understand it, I can't help them get better, right? And people talk about efficiency or process improvement. How can you do that if you don't know what your people go through? And how do you know what your people go through if you want to keep yourself over here? So for me, the first lesson about leadership and culture is leave your ego at home. Be part of the team. Be one with your team, and let everybody know that they can come to you with their thoughts and ideas. They can talk to you about anything. And, we just open door cliche. If it's a cliche, it'll show. If it's truly what you live by, your companies will grow. If people have confidence, they can come to you and talk to you about things, their ideas, their thoughts, their concerns, their challenges. That's when you can solve it. Another thing I always say is that I can't solve it if I don't know about it. So don't be shy. Say it. If there is a concern or issue, bring it up. So for me, leadership is obviously leading by example. Do what you say you're going to do for your people. Do what you say you're going to do for your clients. And do what you say you're going to do for your investors. And if you can't, be upfront and explain why. So at least they don't think that you just said something that you had no intention of delivering. Things change in the business environment. Sometimes you want to do it and you can't. Open conversation is the best thing. You put the facts on the table. People are professional adults. They understand that. And then, walking the walk, right? Don't be the general who yells forward from the rear. Be up there with your team and, put the hours in, put the time in, and show that respect, honesty, confidence, and skills are appreciated. So, it's one of those things you and I can talk about for hours, honestly. But for me, I don't care if you have the most talented people, the best processes and technology, and the most supportive investors and unlimited funds. If you don't have the right culture within your company, you're not going to succeed. You may make money, but I guarantee you've left a lot on the table by not having the right culture.
Drop the mic. You just that was the whole thing. You just said it, Bernard. That was fantastic. You've been with companies from inception all the way through to where they grew very large. So how do you, and actually you're getting ready to do it again. So you have this culture in the beginning, and typically it's what a great feeling, right? I mean, it's a blast in the beginning. And then how do you, I don't think maintain is not, maybe not even the right word, but how do you grow that culture? Does it transform? How do you keep everything, awesome as it grows, right? Really big.
I think there should be some sort of a case study, some sort of a research on this, because it is a great question that you bring up. We all have seen great companies start with fantastic cultures, and somehow growth starts eating away at the culture. My experience has been there's few factors that play into that. One is the more you hire, right? If you don't take time during the hiring process to make sure that you're selecting individuals who are a good fit for that culture. And now your team goes from 50 to 100, so now you have less time as a leader to get to all 100. So if you're hiring new people who are not really a good fit for that culture, that's when you start losing some touch. The other part of it is selecting and hiring, step one. You have to commit time to invest your time with the new people. Tell them what the history of this company is, why it's been successful, how culture has played such a critical role in making it successful, and get them to understand and buy into that culture. If you just hire them and, thank God I've offloaded my accounting team, they got the analysts they needed, right? And you don't really spend time to teach them the culture, but they're not going to learn it. It's not their fault either. They're going to find their own way to survive and be successful. And that's how your culture falls apart. The other thing that I've seen is succession planning. Executives and founders transition out, but sometimes there's not enough time given or enough consideration given that who replaces them has the same culture or at least appreciation for the existing culture. And, we've heard executives come in, I'm going to build my own team. I'm going to put my fingerprints over that. And, if you're talking about technical improvements, if you're talking about process improvements, I understand that. If you're inheriting a culture that's hurting and suffering and needs sort of rejuvenation, I understand that. But if you come in with the idea that I'm not even going to care about what's been here, I'm just going to do what I think needs to happen, I think that break also hurts the culture. And from that moment that you break and the founders exit and the new executives come in and there's not that appreciation for the existing culture, that's when larger companies really lose what I would say, their soul. Mm-hmm. And you start hearing that a lot of people who've been there for a long time, they come up to you and they're like, it's not the same anymore. And it's just a job now, and it hurts. It hurts because you're founder of something. It's within your DNA for the rest of your life and your career, right? So you never want to hear anything like that. You want to hear it. It's all still great, it's still good. And that's what you really want. But I think some of those decision-making process as the companies grow is why culture gets diminished or changed, not always for better.
So Bernard, there's been so many layoffs in our industry lately. I mean, waves of layoffs in the wireless industry. And people are saying it's slow, something's wrong, it's AI. I mean, what are, in your opinion, I know we may not have all the answers, but in your opinion, what are, some of the reasons behind these layoffs, and what does this tell us about where the industry's headed?
Sure. Look, it's never easy for you and I to see our colleagues on LinkedIn announcing that they've been let go and they're looking for opportunities. It's just not a good feeling. I don't wish that on anybody who works honestly and hard for their employer. So I hope we turn this around quickly. There's multiple thoughts that I have on this, and I couldn't tell you exactly which one is the accurate or the leading cause. You hear from the carriers that their capital deployment for this year and even going into next year is remaining pretty strong, and the activity is there. So you have that, but you still see them going through layoffs. So there's a couple of things that's happening. I don't believe it's all AI driven. I know we love to jump on AI as a way of sort of diminishing roles. There is some of that. I could see that with the intelligence that's in the networks today. Maybe you don't need as many optimization engineers and as many, sort of core network engineers because AI is doing a lot of that. I grant you that there is some AI impact there, but we're still talking about thousands of people getting laid off. So there's a lot of outsourcing that's happening by the carriers. So they may not need as much internal staff to do what they were doing because now they're relying on partners. And you would think that if that's the case, then the partners should be growing and they should be absorbing the people who are coming out from the carrier community. And I'm hearing that that is happening with some of the more established service providers. The other thing that I'm wondering about is we are finally about to have a spectrum auction next year, right? Historically, the carriers have to watch their spending lead in a year or so into an auction because the auctions are expensive. They're going to spend billions of dollars to acquire this spectrum. And it's been a long time since US had a spectrum auctioned off, right? So you're forced to invest in your network to keep up from a competitive standpoint and from the demand that's being generated every day. You're looking at this billions of dollars of spectrum auction that's critical for your competitiveness and the health of your network coming down. So you have to prepare for that. And you're coming right off the heels of deploying billions of dollars, getting 5G and 5G Advanced deployed. And as soon as you're done with your spectrum, you're looking at a 6G standard coming up, right? There's a lot of capital deployment coming in, whether it's buying the spectrum or finishing their 5G and now the 6G stuff comes in. So I think what you're seeing is that the carriers are probably optimizing expenses, getting ready for some of the investments they have to make. I don't look at it as a weakness in our segment. I think we continue to see quarterly results by the carriers being very good. And the public tower companies have done well. Crown is definitely restructuring with the fiber and the small cell segments going away. But the results of the publicly traded companies in our segments are still pretty healthy. So maybe I'm wishful thinking because I always believe you have to be positive. And I'm just thinking that what you see over here, unfortunately, is just cost optimization for the anticipation of the expenditure that's coming down the road, and not so much weakness in the job market. And hopefully, these are a lot of experienced people that have been impacted with this layoff. So I hope my company starts growing fast enough that I can absorb all the good ones. And I'm sure that we're going to see a lot of these people getting reabsorbed back in the industry, soon enough.
And what's interesting, Bernard, just in the last 2 weeks, we've gotten busier on the wireless side for staffing. So we've had more inquiries just in the last 2 weeks than I've seen in months. So that's also a good indication and very much in line with what you said. So let's speed up the movie. What is the 10-year vision of Connected Infra Group?
So look, somebody asked me, is this your last hooray? What's the timeline? And I told them, I said, look, I'll tell you another thing I've learned from all the companies we started. If you start a company with an exit date in mind, you're not going to be successful. You got to come in every day, put your sweat into it, put your time into it, and run it to build a good business. And whatever the outcome will be at the right time, it'll come, right? So I couldn't tell you if this is a 6-year, 7-year, 10-year, or 20-year run. I would love to be able to say that 10 years from now, we're one of the premier infrastructure platforms around in this industry. And that 10 years from now, I'm going to be working with Peppertree on a succession plan for somebody else to come and run this and grow it beyond me. I'm not looking for an exit, personally. I'm looking to build a company that's going to be sustained, grow, and be a decent partner for our, clients and our, sort of vendors and investors. And 10 years from now, my energy level is not where it needs to be. I will gladly, hand the baton to somebody else. But my goal is that 10 years from now, we're rocking and rolling and growing, and the new generation of executives come in to take over.
So much wisdom in this episode, Bernard. You are such an inspiration. I love our conversations, and I truly appreciate you coming on the show. I know that everybody listening to this will be so inspired. So thank you.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Really enjoyed it.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in to Let's Get Digital. This podcast is powered by Broadstaff, a national staffing firm specializing in digital infrastructure talent. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and join me next time as we explore more stories at the intersection of technology, talent, and transformation. Until then, let's get digital.